Now, have you ever taken a photo with a great composition and it looks great on your camera's LCD screen? But when you get home and upload it onto your PC, it turns out just to be another boring image. And your next step is to throw it in the trash bin. Well, now you're in luck because it's happened to me lots of times. But I'm going to show you this amazing technique I've developed. Simple, easy workflow. I'll be using Adobe Camera Raw and a little bit of Photoshop. That will turn that boring image into an amazing, dramatic, black and white fine art beauty.
So here we have the image opened in Adobe Camera Raw. If you're using Lightroom, it's just the same. All the sliders and the masking and the other tools, they'll do the same functions, so there's not much difference. I just find it by using Adobe Camera Raw, it's easier to switch from here to Photoshop and back again. Well, we'll start editing. I'm going to change the profile to Adobe Landscape. That's the first thing I always do. And I'll be reducing the highlights all the way down. The shadows, I'm going to leave them how they are. As you can see, the histogram is pushed to the right as I expose to the right while taking the image. I'm going to raise the whites just a bit until we don't have any clippings. I'm holding down the Alt key while sliding the white slider. Always checking the histogram on these small boxes. Going to do the same for the blacks. Increase the contrast just a bit and reduce the exposure until we have an even image in the histogram. Like I said in previous videos, my aim is to boost the colors, but I do not touch the colors, the vibrance or saturation here. Instead, I go down to the calibration and use the blue primary slider, the saturation. I boost it all the way up and then dial it slowly down, not to over exaggerate, and I always go somewhere around halfway. Now from here, I'm going to go up to the effects, increase slightly the texture, a bit of clarity, and a dehaze. You can see much more detail while I'm using the dehaze. Not too much though. By the way, this image was taken with a vintage lens of mine, 70-200, a Tokina vintage lens. I'm going to reduce a bit of the exposure somewhere there. Next, I'm going to go down to the detail panel. I always reduce the radius, increase the detail, hold down the Alt key and slide the masking slider until we don't have any noise in the image. And here we'll be targeting the white areas for the sharpening. I can increase slightly the sharpening a bit more to 60, and here I'm going to use the noise reduction slider. I'm going to go all the way up to 25. We're ready from these panels. I'm going to check the optics. They're already clicked, these two here. Take a look at the image before we switch over to Photoshop. We'll be turning it to black and white there in Photoshop. Everything seems okay. I already cropped the image to a 4:3. Straighten the horizon. Now I'm going to take it to Photoshop, where we're going to turn it to black and white. Click OK here. Here we are in Photoshop. I'm going to duplicate the background, which I always do just in case I make a mistake. What you do is hold down the background here, click on the mouse and drag it down to the plus, and you duplicated the background. Now from here, go down to this adjustments panel layer and go to black and white. I'm going to switch it to auto and see if there's any difference. Not much. These are the individual colors have targeted the image, the colors. You can play around with them, which I'll be doing. Increase the reds a bit, which is targeted here. Check the yellows. I'm going to slightly increase the brightness here of the yellows. Check the greens. Not much. If you double click, it goes back to your original setting. Check cyans. It's targeting the sea, water. I'm going to dial it down a bit. I want the water a bit dark. Try the blues, and it's targeting the sky. Don't dial it down too much. You get this weird effect here. You can see it was on 20. I'm going to dial it down just a bit more. Around -3. Magentas is next. It's targeting the sky as well. I'm going to dial it around to 60. I can close this panel. And now what I do, I use the gradient tool, gradient map. Click on it. You see it's turned to a much better black and white, more contrast. Click this drop down window and click on classic, which I found is the best one. There we have it. You can leave it how it is or click on the gradient map here and play around with these sliders. The whites, if you drag it up, it's going to increase the whites. If you drag it down, it's going to go back to where it was. And the same for the blacks. I'm going to dial it down a bit more, the blacks, how it is. Should be okay. Click OK. Close this window. And here I always flatten the image before taking it back into Adobe Camera Raw. I flatten the image and take it up to Adobe Camera Raw up here. Go on Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and we're back in Adobe Camera Raw. Reduce the image size just a bit. Here I don't touch anything else. I just gonna use the masking. That's why I come back to Adobe Camera Raw. First thing I do, always, like my other videos, I do a linear gradient for the sky. Somewhat there. I play around with the sliders. I'm going to reduce the exposure. Dial down the highlights all the way down. The exposure like that, and just a bit more, minus 0.95. Make another linear gradient. And you can see the image is turning slowly to fine art. Again, reduce the exposure. Okay, somewhere there. I done 2 linear gradients on top of each other. I'm going to use another linear gradient and use it for the sea. My aim here is to get the sky, top of the sky, and the bottom of the sea around the same gradient, the same darkness. I can use another linear gradient for the sea. Not too much. And it should be okay there. Don't worry about this clipping up here of the blacks. Now I'm going to use a radial gradient for the center of the image. I want to draw the viewer's eye to the center of the image, the main subject, where their eye is always drawn to the brightest part. Gonna slightly increase the exposure, not too much, it's over exaggerated there. Around 45. Okay, I'm gonna use another radial gradient. This is my favorite tool. And here I'm gonna go just over here on the breakwater and the building. And here I'm going to just give it a slight sharpening. Should be okay. I'm going to use another radial gradient. And here we'll be doing a vignette, a natural vignette. It's positioned exactly in the middle. I'm going to invert the radial gradient and create a vignette. Should be okay like this. Now, to liven up the image, I'm going to use another radial gradient, and I'm going to be using it on the sea. Using it here where I have these bright parts. Place it around here. Increase it a bit more. Go down to the exposure panel and raise it slightly. Not too much because it gets really weird again. Just a bit. Subtle effects work better. 35. I use another radial gradient for the other side. Take it around there. Increase it a bit more, the exposure. Okay. I think I can insert another radial gradient somewhere around here. Increase the exposure as well. Close it a bit. All right. We're finished with the masking. And it looks pretty nice. Now here we have one more thing to do. I'm going to take it back over to Photoshop. Press OK. I'm going to again duplicate the background. And here I have a slight request from one of our friends. He left a comment to show him how I use the Lumenzia panel up here in Photoshop. I'm going to be a bit quick so as not to extend the video. I use mostly for black and white images this side here. It targets the brightest parts. Let me show you. If I press L2, it targets the lighter bits. If I go L3, it reduces more the brighter parts. And you have to decide which one you want. And here you can increase or decrease the lighter parts of the image. I'm going to put it up to about 1.75. And what I do, I go on the brightness here, over here on the adjustments. I click it once. We made a mask here. I double click on here, contrast and brightness, and it opens up another panel here. I always use auto for here, and here it's targeted just where the mask was, the brighter parts. The darks and all this are not affected. These are called luminance masking. That's why it's called Lumenzia. I close this panel and now I can adjust the opacity how much I want. I'm gonna show you the before and after by clicking the eyeball here. You can see it's just targeted the brighter parts of the image you selected. You can see here. And if you want, you can reduce slowly by dialing down the opacity slider. Here it comes to nothing, and increase it just a bit how you want. I'm going to leave it around 80. Okay. And there I just showed you how to use the luminance panel, the Lumenzia. The last thing I'm going to do is what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to remove this one the panel I just showed you, this tab here. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to delete it. I just showed you that for our friend who left a comment to show him how to use this panel here. Instead, I'm going to go down to the adjustment masking and go up to the curves. I go down to default settings. I use linear contrast. This is roughly doing the same thing as the Lumenzia. I'm going to raise by clicking down once on there and use the up arrow. And here I'm going to click on the whites and raise it ever so slightly. And there it's just done practically the same thing as here. If you don't have Lumenzia, you can use this curves panel here. Check the before and after, clicking on the eyeball. I'm going to flatten the image. And there we have our final image. Dramatic, black and white, fine art. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Watch my other videos. They all have different images and some extra tips in them, which will help you in your editing. Thank you once again, and hope to see you again. Thank you, and see you guys. Bye. One more thing, make sure to check the final image. This is the edited image that I just showed you for editing purposes. I've done another image before. And make sure to check it out at the end of the video. Thanks once again, and bye.